So it's all about recordings, speaking of which. So by default, before this feature came out, it was kept forever, right? And so you can deal with it manually, but that takes up a lot of space, especially if you're recording a lot of meetings, or if you have, as far as the way you have your meeting set up, you're literally having it auto record all the time. And you don't necessarily need to always keep that all the time, right? So it's very important to be able to maybe adjust or remove them after a certain amount of time, or the end user has to do something with it. That's really the basis for this particular feature change, right? So when it came out, its default to 60 days, right? So 60 days after this meeting has happened, then it will automatically delete, right? And this is within SharePoint or OneDrive, doesn't matter where it happens to be. So it's important to keep this in mind, that if you want that to be something different, right, you have this ability as an admin to go in here and change that expiration date. And you can set the maximum of 273 years. Who cares, right? That's possible. I don't know if anybody would want to do that, but that's possible. What will happen is this continues to go out. So it's already starting to go GA, which means not everybody has it right now. This was back in November it started. I should say in January. Originally it was in November. They pushed it to January. It finally started releasing now. It's going through mid-February. So it's important to keep in mind is even though it's out or it's releasing, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get it right away. So keep that in mind. All right, and I think we have somebody that's muted. Find it. You got it, Michelle? Awesome. All right, let's go to the next one. All right, the other one I thought, and Michelle and I were online actually talking about this with another scenario that had come up, and this is actually a pretty big deal. I mentioned it last week or last month in our meeting that it was coming. It's available now, but it's important to understand that there is ability to be able to now do audience targeting with dynamic Azure AD groups. Dynamic Azure AD groups is part of the license, the premium license, the Azure AD, but it gives you this capability to be able to say, these parameters, I want to be able to have an Azure Active Directory group that dynamically changes as people change roles or as people leave the organization, or based off whatever criteria you have in there, you have this ability to be able to add and remove users. Well, now, up until then, you could only do SharePoint groups or 365 groups, and that's it. And those were static groups unless manually changing those. Now this gives us that capability of having a true dynamic scenario for our end users as they're moving around. So again, another big one that's going to come through. All right, so let's hit some of the other ones that are happening. And we go through, and most of the time we'll hit a majority of this is going to be across M365. Sometimes features are happening with different products. For instance, this time we actually have one on bookings, which we had a session on what bookings was not that long ago. And it just depends upon what's happening. So the first one, and again, I'm calling this out as much as possible. Some things are in public preview versus being actually rolled out, right? So public preview means that if your tenant, if you have some users within your tenant that's enrolled in the public preview capability, then they may have access to this, right? So, or you may opt in for your organization to be able to do public preview. Understand that that's still moving to general availability, and that's coming out. So right now, public preview for this particular one, MS Info Protection, new roles and new groups. This is happening here early January to early February, and especially around the information protection side of things, these are very needed. Being able to segment who can do what from an admin to an analyst to an investigator to a reader is very important on the compliance side, right? So information protection. They also have associated groups around that, right? So you can have an information protection, which is full control over everything within that compliance information protection center. So keep that in mind, something to look forward to and something to adjust, especially from your administrative side of things. All right, Office Web and SharePoint, create and manage your verticals within Microsoft Search. So a very long time ago on the SharePoint side of things, we really had the capability of doing some customizations when it comes to SharePoint and creating our own verticals. This is now that evolution of what Microsoft Search is in Office 365 and giving us a lot of those capabilities we had in the past, right? So this rollout, this late December, it's already started, right, to late January. So again, you may not have gotten it yet, but you have this capability now to be able to create and modify the out of the box. You can create new ones if you want to, but you can modify the out of the box search verticals that are already in there. So you don't have to just stick with the ones that are there. You can modify those if you want something a little bit different, right? But it's all under Search and Intelligence Admin Center found in the Office 365 Admin Center. If you are going to make some of those changes, just make sure those people who are responsible for those verticals and setting those up understand this change is going to happen. All right, another SharePoint one. This is one specifically around the My Feed web part, which is part of SharePoint Online. And this is rolling out between, in a couple of weeks here, all the way to the end of the year, or should I say end of the January. And basically they're just new additional components that are going to pop into the My Feed web part. And that My Feed web part has a lot of different pieces to it. What's getting added is the suggested tasks. So if you have a task, and this is all based off of email, so understand this is all AI-driven content. So if in there you said, I will work on X, Y, and Z, it'll actually pop up and say, hey, do you want a task for this? Do you want me to add it to do? Or do you want to say happy birthday to Charlotte? Now, this is those types of things. Some of this information is if you've opted in to linking your account to LinkedIn, right? So that you can see that information. But that's one of the predecessors you have to have is that LinkedIn capability. Things like meetings out of routine. If this is a one-off, and if it's a out of your normal work period, make a new, suggestion for a new time. Those types of things are going to be popping up into this My Feed web part in SharePoint, right? Connected to your Outlook and what's happening there. Microsoft List Board View. I brought this one in there because it was interesting just because the fact is now, this is really starting to look like, the Kanban boards or even Planner to a certain extent, but you can do it with your list content that you already have in there. Customized fields, all of that. So you have this ability to be able to, on the card itself, the information that's in those boxes, you have the ability to say what columns that you want to be able to display within that. You may not have everything, but in this particular view, you want to be able to say, I want these cards and I want this information in there. And you can drag and drop and organize it however you need to. So a manual capability. So very, very similar to some of the things we've seen like Kanban boards or even what we're now doing in some of the planner side of things, but you can now do it with a custom or your Microsoft list, right? That's happening mid-January, so pretty soon to early February, so look for that. All right, I do have a Viva one, enabling delay delivery plan in Outlook, and this is in preview. Rollout here for preview is for February to mid-February, and then standard, this is coming out here soon after that, for mid-February to late February. So basically what it is if you're doing an email and it happens to be 2 or 3 of the people that are in the email, that's not their normal working hours, it's going to understand that and say, hey, do you want to do what's called a delayed delivery? And the thing about it is if you get emails after hours, and you happen to be looking at your email, you want to try to respond to it. You have to pull yourself back, but by doing something like this, it says, hey, by the way, that's out of their work schedule. What do you think about maybe doing it tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., right? And making those types of suggestions. Again, this is AI-driven, pulling that necessary information in to be able to make those decisions. And understand, though, You do have to have that My Analytics service plan with E5 licensing, so it's the higher level. But I mean, this is something that's going to be beneficial for those people who are doing a lot of emails and want to get that information out, but they want to be timely on it, right? They want to get an immediate reaction from somebody. All right, bookings. As I mentioned, there was actually one on bookings. So this one is QView, which is a different view inside the Teams booking app. Now, this is the app. So this is not necessarily, you go to Bookings Web and you go into the Bookings Web look, right? This is when you bring bookings into Teams as an app. You're going to now have another tab in there called QView. This is rolling out here, public preview, should be going already out now, standard mid-January to late January. And basically, it's going to give you a consolidated look of all bookings for your organization if you're utilizing it for that. And then you can actually join meetings from there. You can send an SMS, you can send an email, you can edit, right? You can do all those things that you would normally do individually, but you can see that holistically, right? You can even enable self-service for somebody else to be able to handle or take over if need to be, if I have to be out and I'm managing those things for my organization. But again, it's specifically the Teams app inside the Teams client that this is focused on and not in the web version of it. All right, big update now coming up with Stream, and this has been talked about in the past. This is coming. Finally, we're now starting to get closer to actually seeing it. Targeted release early March to end of April. Standard release early April to end of April. And basically what it allows us to be able to do is the files, the transcript files and the caption files specifically. Sometimes they're not accurate, right? So if we want to be able to go in there and make a change to that, you have that ability to be able to upload, download, and delete captions if you need to. It is using a WebVTT file format, which is standard for these types of things. If you want to modify any of those things, you would need to have an app that actually reads that file format, make that change, save it, and then upload it back into the meeting. This also works, and they're also doing this feature with Teams live event transcripts. So if you're doing live events, you have this capability to be able to do it. This is, again, if it's inside, do we have it in OneDrive or we have it in SharePoint and it's shared there? You have to have edit permissions to be able to make these changes. View people are, if you have view permissions, you'd be able to display the transcript. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to make any changes, but you have to have at least the ability to edit that video to be able to get at these features. And once you are able to access it, then you can make those changes. We have a Yammer one that just came out not too long ago, and this is cross-geo external specifically for organizations that are working with the European Union. I know not everybody is doing that, but I know European Union always has these stipulations when it comes to data. And now finally the capability of being able to say, hey, I want to have a EU user in a United States Yammer network. I can now do that, and I don't have to have two different, Yammer groups to be able to handle that. So it allows me to be able to set that up. As an admin, you have this capability of going in there and saying, I want to be able to approve everybody that comes from an external network type scenario. I want to be able to say yay or nay on that. That is something you can enable. And then be able to not allow somebody from the UN if that's something that you want to be able to do, right? But otherwise, this is going to be available here in mid-March to mid-February to late March. Jumping on the team side, there always seems to be a few things on the team side that we need to talk about. On the team side, this one's a very from a user voice, this is huge. There's a lot of people that were talking about, hey, I don't want to see myself in the meeting all the time. Like right now, I'm looking at the Teams meeting and I can see myself gesturing and I can talking, but with this feature, I will have the ability to hide that so it's not distracting from me. Notice the rollout standard, January to early February, GCC late January to end of February, GCCH mid-February to end of March, and then DoD February to mid-March. Again, this is that me box there, right? And I want to be able to hide myself. And it just makes it a little bit easier for people to be able to, interact and do things without having to see that. Now, when you do hide it, it actually gives you a little indication that, by the way, you hid your video. You're not seeing it, but it's on, right? So those types of things will help, especially for those people who are presenting and don't necessarily need to see themselves speak, right? Another one is, again, Teams specific, automatically detect music. Again, notice this is coming out standard from late January to mid-February. GCC, GCCH, and DoD are a little later after that. This is utilizing that same feature, the noise suppression feature that has been out for a little while. It's using machine language to be able to identify that noise and do something with it. It's the exact same engine behind the scene, but now it's really looking at, hey, music has been detected. Do we need to suppress that? So say, for instance, you're at a coffee shop and you want to be able, you don't want to hear, somebody's at a coffee shop, you don't want to be able to hear that. It can suppress that noise. That's the capability of it doing it. Or we want it to come through. As an example, like at a music lesson, right? So again, update that knowledge. You'll notice this bar will come across, that high fidelity mode bar will come across. And then once it's enabled, you'll see that little music sign inside Teams meeting showing that it's the high fidelity mode has been enabled. All right, a couple on, we actually have one on Teams rooms. And if you are utilizing Microsoft Teams rooms, the Windows version, this is something that Microsoft, we've been kind of talking about, is like the next iteration of the conference room experience with Microsoft Teams rooms. This is coming here late January to late February, and basically it's a new layout that's going to be available inside the Microsoft Teams for Windows. If you go to the display, you'll be able to choose the layout, and it's called Front Row. And basically the idea is that in a hybrid scenario, when you have people that are in the office in the conference room and you have those that are working at home, it'll be more at eye level, right? So if you have that display that's sitting there with the people, the remote people being remote, they're going to be farther on the bottom, which is more in eye level and more of a way to be able to connect with those people. Experience. So a couple of things about that. This can be set for default for that particular room. If you have a single display, it'll show 4 participants across that. If you have a multiple displays, 2 displays, you'll see 9 going across the bottom. And it can fit rooms from 16 to 9 display, or 21 to 9 is even optimal as well. But big changes coming on the MTR side of things, or the Microsoft Teams room. But again, it's Microsoft Teams room for Windows. This is not available for Android as of yet. Another one is now a lot of people have complained about the fact that I want to be able to just mute all notifications. Notifications like chats and all that kind of stuff that pop up during the meeting can be distracting. So here, this mute notifications during meetings between early February to mid-March is starting to happen. And you can do it a couple different ways. You can disable on your particular version of Teams, right? Your client, you can go into the profile picture, global settings, notifications, and meetings, and adjust it from there. Otherwise, if you go into the meeting settings, right, the ... that gives you the ability to not allow notifications. Again, making it easier to focus on the meeting and not get distracted from everything else that happens to be going on. Some quick mentions. Again, there's always things happening in here. Out of this, there's a couple ones I wanted to really point out. The connected templates, I think, is going to be big for you guys. Think about this. If I build a Microsoft Teams site, I get the generic out-of-the-box SharePoint site. Same thing. If I have a SharePoint site, I can't really deal anything or do anything from a Teams side of things. What this is basically saying is now these are going to be connected. And if I say I want to create a Teams site and I want to make a planning type team site or a PM type project type team site, then I want to have these particular channels. I can also say that, hey, this SharePoint site, which is a project SharePoint site with this project content information on the home page, these lists, these libraries, I now can have a connected experience across Teams and SharePoint. Something I think has been coming a long time and a lot of people have been asking for. Cortana push to talk, that icon's changing, so not a big thing, just people may freak out when things change. And this is for MTR consoles. Microsoft Editor. I don't know how many of you guys are using Microsoft Editor for spell check and grammar, but it's coming to SharePoint pages. So when you're in a SharePoint page, you don't have to rely on the browser to be able to check your, how you can sometimes set that up to be able to have an extension to be able to check your grammar or check your spelling. Automatically, it's going to happen on the pages. You'll start seeing the red lines and the blue lines to be able to say, hey, here's a grammar issue, or here's a spelling issue. Meet Now, which is another thing for Microsoft Teams Windows, Microsoft Teams Rooms for Windows. This is the Meet Now capability is really that ad hoc, and it's becoming more upfront on the homepage where you can still do dialing to, bring people in, but you start the meeting there to make an ad hoc, and then you add participants, whether they be from the directory or a phone number. And then just a little bit of change in the app's native permissions, something to think about that you need to look at. But it is, if you're using web version of Teams, the users are going to have to provide permissions for apps to access, right? So that'd be camera, microphone, and location. Very similar to what we see in mobile devices. It's now going to start happening more to the Teams app in the browser. Some updates, and anytime you see something that's on here, this means that a lot of times the timeline has been pushed, right? So keep that in mind, and I try to kind of call out those changes as much as possible. So again, you'll have access to this. There's a lot of information in here, but just a couple of high-end ones like the isolated audio for NDI and hardware out. That is the capability of doing audio stream only for NDI, which is be able to separate out all the audio from all the participants. And then you can use another tool like OBS or other tools to be able to, individually deal with that audio stream. Press to mute, which got moved, and basically the ability to hold a control and space key down to unmute and then release that, and that will mute you again. Background effects for web is a big one. The markup ink for edit, that is the capability of being able to mark up a picture that's stored within OneDrive or SharePoint, and you can draw on it, you can highlight things. So some of those are the big ones that are coming up. Admin actions, again, if you're not sick and tired of people telling you IE11 is going away, get there, get it taken care of, come up with an alternative. I also threw in the SharePoint on-premises cumulative updates. If you guys still have on-prem SharePoint, which some people do, there was a release in December, and these are updates for 2019, 2016, and 2013. Yes, there are still some organizations that have 2013. I'm not going to name them, but they're still there. So make sure you get those cumulative updates out there. And then last but not least, this came out end of December. I thought it was really funny, especially those guys who are SharePoint people. I think it's one of those things that back in the old days, it was all about subsites. In the modern way of doing things, not anymore, right? So please take a look at that. It's a PDF, it's a download, it's a good read. You'll have a little chuckle. All right, I think that's it, Michelle.
All right, sounds good. I know there's a question I'm not going to get to quite yet until I am able to dig, but is connected templates also coming to GCC in January, February? I know if you can.
Michelle, you got muted all of a sudden.
Okay, somebody muted me. You didn't like what I was saying. No, is the templates, connected templates, going to be on the roadmap for GCC in the same time period? Go ahead and Don, take a look if you wouldn't mind. But what I wanted to also share
Yep.
As well as a lot of times when you open that up in the Message Center, we have a correlating roadmap number. So you can go ahead and click on the link inside the Message Center to get more on those dates. A lot of times, though, for any questions related to GCC, I tend to narrow down my filter in the roadmap and just look at GCC and then see if that item's in there. And that's a surefire way of finding out if that is truly going to be a part of that same time period. So anyway, that's what I like to do. All right, let's go ahead and move things